Hello, and welcome back for another Torah Tuesday. Today we're continuing in our exploration of the traditional 10 plagues, or the signs and wonders. Okay, today we are in Exodus chapter 8, verses 16 through 19. If you're following along in the Hebrew text, it's verses 12 through 15. I'm going to begin by reading from my own translation from the Hebrew of these 3 verses, and then I'll make some comments. Yahweh said to Moses, "Say to Aaron, stretch out your staff and strike the dust of the earth, that it may become lice throughout the land of Egypt." So they did this. Aaron stretched out his hand with his staff, and he struck the dust of the earth, and it became lice on human and on animal. All the dust of the earth became lice throughout the land of Egypt. Then the magicians did likewise with their secret arts to bring out the lice, but they were unable. The lice were on human and animal. So the magicians said to Pharaoh, "This is the finger of God." But Pharaoh's heart was firm, so he did not listen to them, just as Yahweh had spoken. All right, this is the last sign in the first cycle of signs. So as I've mentioned in the past, the signs fall into 3 groups of 3. And each of those groups of 3 is its own cycle. Each sign in the cycle shares elements with others that fall in the same position. So it creates kind of a grid of signs. So I have expressed elsewhere that I believe there are 12 signs and wonders, not just 10. So the way this works is there's a prologue, the staff into snake, and then we have 3 cycles of 3 signs that form a grid pattern. And the 10th traditional plague, the death of the firstborn, gets grouped together with the 9th. You'll notice if you read those chapters that the 10th is embedded within the 9th. And then there's a climax sign at the end, which is the swallowing of Pharaoh's army in the Sea of Reeds. So that's how we get 12 total. But it's interesting to note this cycle of signs, these cycles of 3. So the 3rd sign in this first cycle gets no advance warning, just like the last sign of the other 2 cycles. And it completes a pattern that is shared by all of the first 3 signs in cycle number 1, including the prologue. It also shares these signs with them. So it involves the staff of Moses and Aaron. The magicians play a role. Aaron is the one doing the action. He stretches out his hand. We're told that Pharaoh does not listen, and we're told that the events unfold just as Yahweh said they would. So those are the shared elements of this first cycle that unite signs 1, 2, and 3. The water to blood, the frogs, and now the lice. And we can also include the prologue of the staff into snake, but I don't group it into the first column because it doesn't share the elements of the first column of the 3 cycles. It's kind of complex. For a long time, I had all the signs taped to my door, to my office door, so that I could see all the relationships between them and highlight and sticky note and all of that. But I've taken it down now and digitized my chart, and you can look forward to seeing that in my published commentary when it comes out on Exodus. Okay, another thing that's interesting about this sign is that Aaron strikes the ground, and the word strike occurs in 4 of the signs, and they happen to be the 4 corners on the chart. So the first and last sign in cycle 1 and the first and last sign in cycle 3 include striking, which is striking because Pharaoh has been striking the Hebrews, and God has said that he's going to strike Pharaoh and all Egypt. So the fact that striking is involved in the implementation of the signs shows that the punishment fits the crime. Okay, so in this sign, Aaron strikes the dust of the earth with the staff. You could probably immediately think of places in Genesis where dust factors in, like the creation of humans, and other places as well. But I think the most significant mention, the most relevant mention of dust in Genesis is in chapter 13, verse 16, where God promises Abraham that his descendants will be as many as the dust of the earth. So now we're in Exodus, and in chapter 1, verse 12, the Egyptians express disgust at the proliferation of the Hebrews. And so now their displeasure is magnified as God takes the dust of the earth and makes it problematic for the Egyptians. Now, you probably noticed that I translated this insect that afflicts them as lice, which is not the typical translation. Many translations say gnats, and I always thought gnats were a good choice. Actually, if you survey the commentaries, there are all kinds of different proposals. So gnats, fleas, mosquitoes, a small fly, a bark-dwelling insect, or maggots. These have all been proposed. It's impossible to be sure which insect is designated by the Hebrew word used here. The reason that I chose lice, for a long time I was thinking it was gnats, but then I noticed there's no description of these insects flying at all. It's just the dust becomes this insect and it's on human and animal. And of course, gnats, if you're sweaty, gnats might land on your skin, and so they might be on you. So I can imagine gnats being on human and animal. But because there's no description of flying, and because the next sign very deliberately describes the flying, the swarming of flying insects, it makes more sense to me that this one would be a crawling insect rather than a flying one. So that's why I've rendered it as lice. It's significant in this sign that the magicians try to replicate the sign as they did the first 2 times, first 3 times if we count the staff into snake, and this time they are unsuccessful. They're finally defeated. It's finally obvious that Yahweh's power exceeds the power of Pharaoh's magicians. And so after this, no attempt by the magicians is mentioned. In fact, they tell Pharaoh, this is the finger of God. There are several places in the Bible where it talks about the finger of God. I suspect that in this case, the reason why they say this is the finger of God is that they suspect we have only begun to see what Yahweh is capable of doing. This is what he does when he's using his pinky finger. If we don't respond, if we don't acknowledge his greatness, this could get a lot worse. And indeed it does. So that brings us to the close of the first cycle. I hope you're enjoying this exploration. Next week, when we return, we'll start cycle number 2 with the swarms of flies. Have a great week.